Hey everybody, it's John Darr, and we are here with the wonderful Marie Banks. I don't know what episode we're on. I wish I'd kept track of what episode we're on, but it's, I don't know, five or six, something like that.
Who's counting?
Doesn't really matter. In case it happens, where an insurance agent and a personal injury attorney talk about sometimes very specific cases. Obviously, names are withheld. And we talk about it from the angle of what to do in case it happens to you. So that's the premise of the podcast. So let's get into it. We've got an interesting case today that hopefully people will, if not learn a little bit about, if it happens to them or it could happen to them, and go from there. So, all right, lay the detail or lay some details out of the case, Marie, and we'll start talking about it.
Okay, this is one of those really interesting fact patterns. And I guess I would set the stage by saying there are times when we're all driving in our vehicle and we think we're doing maybe very basic small maneuvers in our car. We might not be fully paying attention. We're just backing up. We're maybe going slowly in a neighborhood. And there's this fallacy that we think, oh, well, maybe this is a good time for me to be on my phone, or and I'm going to confess, I am guilty of this. And I internally yell at myself every time I catch myself doing it when I'm backing out of my driveway and I've got my daughter in the back and she wants, her favorite song on, and I'm getting Spotify up on my phone and I'm like, I'm only going 5 miles per hour. This is safe. The reality is people are out in the neighborhoods. They're walking their dog. They're bringing their trash cans to the edge of their driveway. And this is almost one of the more important times to be paying attention. So that's kind of the foundation I want to lay when I go into the story, because our actions have consequences. And a lot of times when we're not really paying attention, maybe 9 times out of 10, there's not a consequence to that, but there is a chance that it could be a really, really bad consequence. Sometimes in our field, we handle what's called wrongful death cases. And that's just if somebody dies because of someone else's negligence. And they're hard claims, they're emotional claims for obvious reasons. We usually have either a surviving spouse come to us, or maybe it's surviving children, sometimes surviving parents. They've lost a child. They want to know if they have any recourse for what happened. So in this particular case, there was a gentleman. He's in his low 80s. He was a Vietnam vet. He fought in the war. He unfortunately suffered from Agent Orange and had lost one of his kidneys to that, and the other one needed a transplant. So he got a transplant failed. And so he was on dialysis. But was like, other than that, was a very healthy guy. Like he just
living as normal of a life as he could.
Normal life as he could. I mean, he was able to live in his house with his wife, whom he'd been married to for over 40 years. And he was taking his trash or I think he was actually going out to collect his trash can. The waste people had already come, so he was going to go bring in his trash. So mobile. He was on something called peritoneal dialysis, which is where they actually put, I think, the device in your peritoneal cavity. And so it just helps you do what the kidneys would do.
Mm-hmm.
Other than the kidney issue, he was a healthy guy. Unfortunately, when he was bringing his garbage cans in, someone who was driving in the neighborhood, I don't give too many details, and I don't even honestly remember, this case was a while ago, but they were backing into his driveway. And you can, think of any scenario. Maybe they were trying to turn around, they were going the wrong way or whatever it could be, but they were backing into his driveway and maybe didn't see him. Maybe they weren't paying attention. Whatever it was, they hit him and he fell really hard on his left side. And for an 80-something-year-old man, that's they always say, if you're in, your 70s or 80s, the last thing that you need to have happen to you is to fall. It's like your health just declines after that. So he suffered a really bad fall. But what was even worse for him was, because of that dialysis that he had going on. The peritoneal device was in him, and it actually, the fall made that puncture something internally. So from that moment, instead of just suffering like a, hematoma and a fracture maybe of a bone, he had internal damage and had to go into the ER, went into the hospital, all these surgeries. They discovered the perforation. Sadly, I think it was like 60 days after the fall, he passed away. And so the challenge of the case was, and everybody would ask, this would be the challenge for the jury, was his death caused by this fall? And so I think those types of cases are interesting. And we were able to convince the insurance company that a jury would certainly believe that, because the law says that you take the plaintiff as you find him. So this person who backed into this client of ours, maybe it wasn't foreseeable that he would die from falling down. But in the law, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's an unusual thing that happens, or I think if it's unforeseeable or unusual, the negligent party will still be held liable for those damages. And so I think some people feel like that's a really hard thing in the law, but nonetheless, that's the standard. And I think that ultimately what we were able to do is get a settlement from our client's uninsured motorist carrier. We always come back to UM when we have podcasts.
It sure seems like we always end up there. Yes.
So I'm sure when you're sitting with your clients and you're talking about the importance of UM, that's probably not something that comes up. Someone backs into you or hits you while you're walking your dog. You want your UM. So
yeah. Well, it's interesting because I think a lot of people have this perception or concept of, car insurance covers a car accident. Yes, it does. But they have this thing about, well, if I'm going 40, 50, 60 miles an hour down the road and have a car accident, yes, that's going to be a severe, catastrophic type situation. But it doesn't always take a 50 mile an hour accident. And one of the things, that people need to understand and realize is two things. I think one, you can have an accident even in backing up in a driveway, which is, I don't know, 3-5 miles an hour. You're not going very fast, and, hit somebody and do a lot of damage to people. And unfortunately, in this case, the gentleman passed away from the complications of this, getting his garbage can out. So most people don't, when we sit down with them, they go, oh, that's not going to happen to me. It's, I can't imagine that happening. True, it probably won't happen to you. But in case it does happen, whether you're the driver or the guy with the garbage can, that's the really interesting thing to me is, okay, here's car insurance. Car insurance is going to apply not only to the driver, but to the guy just taking his trash out. I mean, that's where people, if I asked, hey, can you ever think of a scenario where your car insurance is going to apply to you going to get your garbage can? And they're going to go, no.
What?
Right. Yeah, but it does.
Or walking your dog.
Walking your dog or
anything like that. And that's where I think that it's a very significant thing to realize, and the amount of coverage that you're carrying, because obviously if you're a person of means, you should have the right amount of bodily injury insurance, because of situations like this person who backed into him is ultimately responsible for this man's death. Now, that sounds harsh, but it is a reality under the law. You just have to prove that it's more likely than not that your negligence was a substantial factor in the loss to this person. And it can even happen in correlation with another thing. In this case, this guy had something else going on medically.
Other things, yeah. Mm-hmm.
But your action, if it starts this process of, causing the complication, You can still be held responsible. And you have to also think about, you brought up the example of if you're driving in your car and you're going, 45 miles per hour and you get in a wreck, you think, yeah, I'm going to need car insurance for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I see oftentimes those wrecks don't have it's not as catastrophic of a damage usually, because you're in a vehicle and it's got airbags, and if you got your seatbelt on, different things like that, you could still suffer a serious injury. You're most likely going to recover with the right medical treatment. You might need surgery. But if you're out walking, you're totally exposed. You don't have the benefit of that car and the airbags and everything around you. And so that's why, when you think about having coverage, if you're someone who has a lot of bodily injury coverage on your policy, and John, you can speak to this. When you want uninsured motorist coverage, can you ever get more than your bodily injury coverage?
No.
So if you have a lot of but can you get less? Can you get less than bodily injury coverage?
Yeah.
Not wise.
Yeah, it's not wise, but and you have to sign a form. Anytime you have to sign a form in life, I've learned, if there's a form that they give you that says, "Hey, dum here's a form that you like to understand that you're waiving this coverage and you're waiving buying something that somebody thinks is important because they came up with a form that says, hey, you're waiving this coverage. We think it's important. We think you should have it, but you got to sign this form." Typically in life or in general, anytime you see that form, just take 1 second and read it and go, okay, what exactly is this?
Yes.
I mean, definitely the name of this episode is going to be, does your car insurance apply when you're not driving your car? Something to that effect. Would you ever have an auto insurance claim when you're not driving your car or in a vehicle? And
that is the key to unlocking the uninsured motorist part of a policy, is there has to be a vehicle involved.
Right.
A lot of people ask, the accident has to be caused by a vehicle. If I'm driving down the road and a deer runs out in front of me and I hit the deer and I get injured, I get this question a lot. UM's not going to cover that. Didn't involve another vehicle. One car accidents didn't involve another vehicle.
Right.
So those are unfortunate situations.
Good life insurance.
That's right. But yes, if another vehicle, someone's negligent, you're in your neighborhood, you get hit. And so if you do have good bodily injury coverage on your policy, you've never really considered UM or understood the significance of it. Mm-hmm. What you're giving up is to have help with, if you're going to get hit by a car while you're not in a vehicle, you're either going to have serious medical bills.
Yeah.
We pray that you live, and I have represented people who were hit by cars and lived. Mm-hmm. Usually it's a pretty serious injury that they can recover from, but it's going to be, quite a bit of money in medical. Mm-hmm. The person driving the other car may not be insured. Let's not forget that 1 in 4 drivers in Florida are not insured. They don't have bodily injury coverage. Mm-hmm. What are you going to do? You don't have you're out of luck. Mm-hmm. Even if they have some coverage, it's probably not enough. Mm-hmm. So you definitely want to have as much uninsured motors as you can have in the event a situation like that happens, especially if you're somebody who loves to be outside. You like to run, you like to cycle, you are walking your dog 3 times a day on a road. There's just so many risks you're taking when you're outside. And I hate that. That's what I think about now because of the type of job that I have. But
yeah. Oh yeah, me too. I was riding somewhere on a main highway the other day and there was a guy riding his bike, and don't get me wrong, you're allowed to do it. It's I'm not saying you're not allowed. I'm not saying any of that, but I'm thinking to myself, literally, I bet I was 2 feet from him, going around him perfectly legally going. I don't know what I was going speed limit, but I'm sure I will. I drive like a grandma, so I probably was doing pretty close to the speed limit. But anyway, I'm going around him and I'm thinking, I'm 2 feet from him. I'm going 60 miles an hour. He's going, he's one of these, cyclists see it, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, I just think, there's other, I would think that there's other places to ride a bike other than a main highway, but, he's allowed to go there. But I'm just thinking, hey, this guy multiple times a day is this far away from needing his auto insurance. And he's not even in his car. He's not even,
Not in
he's on
his
his
car.
bike.
You're trusting everyone else to see you. You're trusting. And I'm sorry, I don't trust people, especially maybe it's because I see the auto accidents all the time. That's my world.
Yeah.
But I don't trust people. And even now in neighborhoods, I was with my nephews over Christmas. We were going to walk down to the park. We were in Jacksonville. We were in a gated community, a nice quiet road, and they were riding their, doing their little scooters in the middle of the road. They wanted to go down to the thing, and I see a car coming. And a lot of times I think if you're in a neighborhood, you just assume that the car sees you and that they'll slow down or they'll go around or something. And I was screaming at them, get out of the road. You just still you have to pretend like people don't see you.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of times they don't. And like I already said, especially in a neighborhood with the cell phones, if
Yes.
someone's new to the neighborhood, they're trying to find a location. Maybe they're making a delivery. Maybe they're going to someone's house for the first time, or even going to their own house and they think, they can get there without even looking at the road because they go on this road all the time. They're looking at something on their phone, responding to a text because they think I'm not going fast anymore. I can do this. Just people aren't paying attention. And so I would say if you are somebody who walks the dog a lot on the road or whatever it might be, to always be very aware. Don't assume that the cars see you when they're turning. If you're walking at night, please, there are a lot of people in my neighborhood who do this. They're out walking at like 9:30 or 10 at night. And they're not wearing anything that's bright, no reflectors, no flashlight. I've seen a guy in a black hoodie before, and I'm like, what are you doing? We don't have a lot of great streetlights in our neighborhood. But that's another thing. If you're try to be obvious, try to, show that you're here.
Yeah.
I would still say, this is what we teach our kids, right? When they're learning how to ride a bike, you hear or you see a car coming, you stop, you get off your bike and you go, stand on the grass.
Minimize risk, minimize your chance of getting hit. So, okay. So can you tell us how much this case ended up winning, losing? Like I always go back to the Dan Newland got me $7 million or whatever. Strike that, by the way, from podcast. Can you tell roughly what the settlement was in this case? Or
I can't give you an actual amount, but it was a six-figure settlement because of the amount of uninsured motorist coverage. So, and then to remind the listeners, when you have a wrongful death claim, the claim is actually the survivor bringing a claim for the loss of companionship. I mean, there's a lot of different types of damages. If a young child loses a parent, if I were to pass away, obviously my husband would have a claim, but let's say I passed away and my husband and my daughter would have a claim for loss of, the financial support. She's dependent on me. So there's lots of claims you can make. In this case, obviously, it was mostly a loss of companionship, the mental anguish and pain and suffering of losing your spouse tragically. So those are obviously there's a lot of value there because we value human life. Sure. And sometimes I have these discussions all the time. How do you place a value on someone's life? And a lot of times we're just limited by what's available. In this case, they had a very good uninsured motorist policy. I think the policy might have been $1 million. We settled for less than that because of the various issues with the case. And we were wise enough to know this not a very clear cut case, even though, we have a really good legal argument that he backed in and,
Right.
because of the fall, it caused all these things. But there is some issues there with causation and different things like that. So,
well, yeah, no,
settlement. But again, there was a good UN policy in place.
right.
And we didn't have that. I don't think that this wife would have been compensated fairly.
Right. So my point was, okay, let's say it's a six figure. Well, that's at least 100,000. A lot of times when we sit down with people and we say, okay, uninsured motorist, here's what it covers, how much would you like? That kind of, they don't necessarily know, they don't understand. So, they'll say, well, what do you think I should have? Well, there's lots of examples where it needs to be at least a six figure number. You can't get 10, 20 and 50, 100 and that kind of stuff that doesn't typically make any sense for folks. So my point, I guess, to the question was, okay, how much is enough? Well, here's an example of a guy getting his garbage. He went out to get his garbage and he needed over six figures worth of uninsured motorists, and he's an 82-year-old gentleman that, whatever. So I guess that was the point of the question. But yeah, that's most people don't realize that most people don't realize that these cases do end up being hundreds of thousands of dollars a lot of the time. It's very common to get into those numbers real quick.
Really quick. And I think too, if you're trying to figure out how much coverage you should have, I tell people, well, think about what you would need if you weren't able to work anymore.
Right.
If you suffered an injury that kept you from going back to work indefinitely, it's probably, and that varies for different people depending on what your job is.
Right.
And then I also think of, if you were to be tragically killed, no one wants to talk about that, but we hear about it all the time. No one expects it to happen,
right,
but it does happen. And what do you want? Do you want your family to be taken care of?
Right.
Again, thinking about, you might have life insurance or something like that in place, but you may have, large medical bills. Maybe I've helped people who, I helped a woman whose son was killed in an auto accident, but he wasn't instantly killed. He was in the hospital for a few days and they tried surgeries and he was in a coma. There's an expense there even after he passes, beyond just her mental pain and suffering and the loss of that, relationship. She also is going to get stuck with this big bill and has to pay health insurance back, has to do it's just a lot of things that you don't want to have. If you can avoid it, you would love to not have your family have to worry about that too.
For sure.
So,
thanks, Marie, for going through this tragic love story case. Unfortunately, they made it 40 years, but he didn't get a chance to live out his life like he should have. And all right, thanks everybody. Thanks for watching In Case It Happens, and hope to see you next time. Comment if you have any questions down below. Feel free to ask Marie. It's our answers are free, which you don't often get an attorney to give you answers for free. So it take advantage of that if you're watching. So thanks everybody.